Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm your course instructor Sania Gilani. The subject that we will be studying together is Introduction to Literary Studies. This is an introductory course that gives a brief insight into literature, specifically English literature. Throughout this semester, we will be focusing on examining the term literature itself and also understanding the role of history in the creation of literature. How has literature been affected by the historical context of its time period? I hope at the end of this session you would have learned something. So let's begin. Today's lecture is on the introduction to the terminology literature itself. This session will help us answer two fundamental questions. First, what is literature? Second, why are we studying literature to begin with? So, before I start, let's do a warm-up activity. What comes to your mind when someone asks for a book you adore or a movie you can watch over and over again? Does a movie like Harry Potter series or a book like Jannat Ke Patte count as literature? Ever wondered the book or movie you just consumed was quite deep and left you thinking? What makes a written script memorable? What makes Shakespeare the greatest dramatist of all time? Or is he really the greatest dramatist? Why is Manto still relevant today? What is the literary merit of a text? Some are academic questions, while some are just questions to pique your curiosity. Believe it or not, contrary to the popular discourse today, literature plays a much greater role than we give it credit for in the creation of culture around us. The pop culture today, as we know it, has been directly impacted by literature. Often, when students first hear the word literature, they think of old dusty libraries with novels, poetry, or maybe outdated classics that no one is interested in. But literature is much more than a collection of books. It is a way of experiencing, interpreting, and even questioning the world around us. So, before we start, let's begin with the terminology. How can we define the term? It's a challenge, to be honest. Surprisingly, defining literature is not as simple as it seems. Scholars across centuries have debated what counts as literature. So let's start with the original definition. The traditional view of literature. Traditionally, literature was seen as written works of artistic merit, texts viewed for their beauty, originality, and imaginative power. Poetry, drama, and fiction form the big pillars of literature. Under this view, literature is what elevates language into art. But as you can understand, this is a very narrow definition. On the broader scale, modern critics argue that such a narrow definition excludes too much. Why should oral traditions, folk tales like Heer Ranja, or even contemporary digital texts as a comic you just enjoyed be dismissed as literature? Today, we often define literature more broadly as any imaginative or creative use of language that seeks to communicate human experiences. This could mean epics like Homer's Odyssey, but also modern graphic novels, spoken words performances, or even song lyrics. Now let's come to the functional definition of the term. Some theorists, especially from structuralist and post-structuralist traditions, suggest that literature is not a fixed category at all. It is what a society or a culture chooses to treat as literature. In this sense, the defining shift depends on context. For example, Shakespeare plays were once just a form of entertainment. All the masses came to enjoy those plays, but over time they came to be known as canon, highest form of literature. So, if we try to pull these perspectives together, we might say literature is a language used for distinctive, creative, and often layered ways to reflect, imagine, and challenge human experiences. Now let's come to the second question. Why should we study literature? Since we have a working definition, why are we studying literature? What makes it so important, especially for students like you who are going to think, why are we doing this? I'm not going to be a writer. Why should I care? Here are several reasons. The very first is the cultural understanding that comes with literature. Literature preserves the memory of cultures and civilizations. By reading texts from different times and places, we gain insight into how people lived, what they valued, and how they made sense of life. For example, studying South Asian epics, Pakistani literature, African oral traditions, or European modernist novels allow us to see both the diversity and the universality of human experiences. Second is, it helps us to develop human empathy. Literature allows us to inhabit perspectives beyond our own. A novel like Toni Morrison's Beloved doesn't just tell us about the trauma of slavery, it makes us feel through it. It makes us understand the narrative and the language of a slave. In this way, literature expands empathy, reminding us that the lives of others are just as complex and real as our own. Third is, it makes us develop our critical thinking skills. Literature is not only about appreciating beauty, it is also about questioning assumptions. Why we analyze a text, why we say what is being said, what is left unsaid, whose voice is being privileged, and whose voice is silenced. These questions sharpen our critical and analytical skills, skills that apply beyond the classroom. Fourth is, language and expression is bettered as you consume literature. It refines our command of language. Exposure to different styles, whether concise elegance of poetry or the sprawling description of novels, teaches us the flexibility and richness of expression. This is not just about writing essays, it's about learning to think and communicate with precision and creativity. Fifth, it helps with our personal growth. Literature speaks to the inner self. It gives us metaphors to understand our own joys, struggles, and uncertainties. Sometimes the right poem or story articulates what we could never put into words ourselves. In this sense, literature is not just an academic subject, it is a companion to the journey of life. To conclude, defining literature is a very complex task. It is not limited to old classics or rigid categories. Instead, it is an ever-expanding field that embraces all the creative ways in which language expresses human experiences. And studying literature is not just about passing exams. It is about understanding culture, developing empathy, sharpening critical thinking, improving language, and nurturing our personal growth. As we move further into this course, I encourage you to keep these two questions into mind. What counts as literature? And what does literature do for us as individuals and as societies? The answers may shift as we read more, but that is the beauty of the subject. It invites us to think, question, and keep discovering. Thank you for listening, and I hope you look forward to exploring this journey of literature with me. Thank you.